prosecution's last remark constitutes a false characterization of my client. It's extremely prejudicial, it has no probative value, and it's irrelevant.
If I may ask your indulgence, Your Honor, I plan to establish relevance.
I will give you some leeway, Mr. Arnold, but make your point.
Mr. Lockridge, I believe we were discussing Miss Walker's complete contempt for the law, seeing as how her first act upon arriving in Santa Barbara was to break it.
Objection.
Her first act upon arriving in Santa Barbara to correct you was to get an education. Now, if that's breaking the law, I'm sure she wasn't aware of it.
Mr. Lockridge, there are certain rules that apply to this courtroom. Number one, you will refrain from speaking unless in response to a direct question. Number two, should counsel object, you will sit there quietly while I make a ruling as to whether or not you are to be allowed to answer the question. Are those rules clear, Mr. Lockridge?
Like crystal, Your Honor.
Counselor, you had an objection.
The prosecution is blatantly trying to prejudice the jury against my client. Whether or not B.J. Walker was found in a classroom after school hours has absolutely nothing to do with the death of Frank Goodman, and Mr. Arnold knows that.
I'll be glad to move on.
What a good idea.
Mr. Lockridge, you stated that when you met the defendant, she was a student. Is that correct?
Yes.
Obviously, somewhere along the line, things took a turn and they became a little bit more personal. When did that happen?
Objection. The witness's personal relationship with the defendant has no bearing on this case.
Mr. Arnold, I tend to agree with defense counsel.
I assure you, Your Honor, I have a point.
Then make it before you try my patience.
I'll repeat the question. When did your relationship with the defendant go from that of professor-student to something more personal?
That's hard to say.
Take your time, Mr. Lockridge. We have all day.
B.J. Walker was one of the brightest young writers I'd ever encountered. And in her time in my class, I became sort of a mentor for her. She wasn't very confident in her abilities, therefore, as her professor, I thought it was my duty to help develop her talents.
Weren't you involved in a live-in relationship with Angela Cassidy at that time?
I was.
Didn't you, in fact, terminate that relationship to pursue the defendant?
Objection. What does Mr. Lockridge's love life have to do with this trial?
Overruled. Witness will answer.
Angela and I broke up, yes.
Was it painful?
Not very.
I've seen Angela Cassidy. I have to admit, you're a stronger man than I.
Your Honor.
Move along, Mr. Arnold.
Are you in the habit of dating your students, Professor Lockridge, women that, by definition, are much younger than you?
No.
So B.J. Walker was what, exceptional?
Quite.
In what way?
I don't know if I understand the question.
How did this teenager manage to tempt you away from a mature, very provocative woman like Angela Cassidy?
I think I know what you're insinuating, Mr. Arnold, so let me clear it up for you right now. I have never, nor do I now, have a sexual relationship with B.J. Walker.
Your Honor, this is outrageous. I move that this whole testimony be stricken.
I'll withdraw the question. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lockridge, what happened between you and the defendant on the night of September 22nd?
September 22nd? I don't know.
I'll be happy to refresh your memory. You and Miss Walker were in the pool house at the Capwell home. Please tell the court what happened.